Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm so excited to be with you on LinkedIn, on Periscope, on YouTube. I am just so happy to be here with all of you. We are in store, like we have in store an amazing conversation for us today. If you don't know me, I'm Brittany Campbell-Turner. We live stream every other Friday, and this is the Constructor live stream. We have an amazing person with us today. We've had this person on our audio podcast before, a wealth of information. I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about. We will be talking about the challenge of supporting your employees' mental health as you return to work. There's been so much conversation about what does this look like for so many companies. And with that, we're going to just double check our stream links because we've been having a couple technical difficulties today. But what we will do here is just check our setup here. And then I'll go ahead and make the introduction for our amazing guest. So we're going to just double check to make sure we are online with LinkedIn. We should be catching up to you guys here shortly. Just so I know you guys are out there and having the opportunity to check it out, please respond to me in the chat. Let me know how your Friday is going. Let me know, are you looking forward to the weekend? What's going on with you? Go ahead and put a hello in the chat. Tell me what you're looking forward to this Friday, for the weekend, for the rest of the month. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm really excited that we're going to have this conversation today, particularly around mental health and supporting your employee mental health while we return to work. So with that, I think we're all good and tied into LinkedIn. So I'm going to introduce our guest. Our guest today is Vic Bangia. He is a corporate real estate strategy expert, an author, a keynote speaker, a future of work evangelist, and he is the CEO of Verum Consulting and Outsource USA. So with that, we're going to welcome Vic to the stage. Vic, welcome to the Constructor live stream.
Hi, Brittany. I am so happy to be here, and I'm so happy that we got all our technical issues worked out. It's kind of a freaky Friday today. Everything seems to be going a little sideways, but I'm glad we're online together, and it's so good to see you after so long. We have known each other for a few years. We met at the IFMA World Facility Fusion the first time, and I've been a guest on your podcast in the past, and so I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah, I'm excited about what we have to talk about. I mean, nothing is more important than mental health, especially since there's so many changes that are taking place in the workplace. How have you been through all of this? I mean, it's over a year and some months now. How have you been faring throughout all of it?
Well, so from a business standpoint, really well. Business has kept up. My clients were able to pivot with me. And hang on one second. I got to,
Yeah, if you just turn your volume down there.
yeah, there we go. All right. Wow, this is still on. I'm going to just put my phone down far away so it's away from me. But my clients were able to pivot with me and they were able to maintain business with me, which was great. The thing that changed the most was my ability to travel. I have not traveled since February of last year. In March, I canceled 14 flights that were already booked on my calendar, including 4 international trips. And as a extreme extrovert and somebody who needs to be around people, it's been a really challenging year. And really, one of the reasons why I've been speaking about mental health and wellness and well-being so often in these broadcasts and podcasts and webinars that I'm part of is because I see this as being a very critical issue, not just for people like me who need other people, but the opposite is true too. People who have are introverted or feel a level of disconnection are going to struggle going back into the workplace. And employers are struggling to figure out how to accommodate people's mental health and well-being. And it's an important enough topic that I've been advocating that my clients put it into their facilities management reopening plans.
Man, that's really interesting to know your perspective for your business and how you've had to kind of navigate through, and just that you're an extrovert and you need that socialization. So you've seen the importance of it personally, but I mean, and what we're going to get into is how this translates to organizations. I think it's really interesting that you have that personal perspective too.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I'm a big fan of disruption. I like disruption. I think it's an important uh, it brings about change to the status quo. So disruption is really good. This type of disruption, though, disruption resulting from a pandemic, is more of a seismic shift. It doesn't necessarily bring about change. It brings about a rethinking of everything. And when it comes to normal organizational behavior, I also speak in praise of dysfunction, because dysfunction highlights what needs to change. But there's a level of dysfunction that's gone on for quite a while now within organizations, to where coming back and learning about each other and learning about how to behave in the workplace is going to be a huge undertaking for a lot of companies, and it's going to cause a seismic shift in everything. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So let's get into what we wanted to talk about today. There's been lots of really um, great information coming out of the Microsoft report, and I want you to dig into what that looks like. I'm going to ask you about some of the announcements that came out today from CDC, changing their mask guidelines as well. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. But before we get into that, please share about Microsoft, that report that you were sharing with me about.
Yeah, so it's the Microsoft 2021 Work Trend Index annual report, and I can send you the link, or I can put the link into the chat so that people have a copy of it. But if you just Google Microsoft 2021 Work Trend Index annual report, you should be able to bring that up. And Microsoft had 3 or 4 big themes in that report. First is that the future of work is here, and it's going to be hybrid.
Mhm.
And hybrid means, that it's going to be the new way of working. The label hybrid is eventually going to go away. That's just how we're going to work in the future. But the talent landscape is shifting. And to me, that's really the shifting of balance of power in the workplace. Employees have a greater amount of say with respect to what they will tolerate and not tolerate, with respect to how they're treated in the workplace, how safe they feel. Those are going to be important factors for how willing they are to go back into the office. That's physical safety and psychological safety, and we'll talk a little bit about both of those topics a little later as well.
Yeah.
But one of the most eye-opening things that I saw in that Microsoft report was that 40% of the global workforce is considering leaving their employer this year. That's a huge number. I can't imagine 40% of the global workforce leaving their employer. This is a wake-up call, I think, for
Wow.
employers to understand that the reasons for those, if you peel that back, is loyalty, safety, and an accommodation and appreciation and support of employees' mental health and well-being.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think those are the reports components lay out some really hard stuff for us to have to think through and work through. From and it's a requires for us to start thinking about everything from an employee's perspective, right? Not that it's just starting to think that way, but really think about what that looks like as it changes into this hybrid model and changes the behaviors expected in a workplace.
Right. And it also, makes employers consider what they mean by workplace productivity or productivity in general.
Yeah.
If an employee can work just as productively from home as they can in the office, then what does the office become? Does it become just a place to collaborate, or does it become a place where you just go in and clock out? Because at the end of the day, you talk to some employees and they'll say, when I go to the office, it's no different than working from home. I didn't really spend a lot of time socializing or talking to other people. I didn't spend a lot of time collaborating with others. In fact, there were some people where I'd walk up to them and say, "Hey, haven't seen you in a while. You've been on the road traveling?" And they'll be like, "No, I've been here every day." It's just there are some realities of the office that some people sort of romanticize, that it's something special and has been part of the corporate culture, when maybe that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
And And the flip side of that is, in some companies, it is their corporate culture, and they're showing the cracks in the seams when their employees are not in the office, and it's actually impacting the sense of cohesion in the company.
Yeah, so that's really really interesting, Vic. I do want to let you guys know who are watching. Um, we have just put the report in the chat. So if
Thank
you
you.
are looking for that Microsoft report, you can go ahead and get those details there. Just to kind of reset for those of you who are just joining us, we are talking about the challenge of supporting your employees' mental health as you return to work, and we are talking with Vic Bangia from Varium Consulting. So, Vic, with all that being said, you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned number one, psychological safety. What is that? Could you define that for us?
Well, yeah. So psychological safety is a term that's been around in the industry for a long time. According to Amy Edmondson, who's a Harvard Business School professor, the initial definition of psychological safety was a belief that nobody in the company would be punished for speaking out or coming up with ideas or questions or highlighting any mistakes that the company made. It was kind of a safety net, and really just one that would allow greater team collaboration and greater teamwork. That's kind of the classical definition of psychological safety. But in the context of a post-pandemic workplace environment, I think psychological safety means that if you have fears or concerns or issues related to being in the office or going back to work, or part of the overall reopening plan for the company, that all of those need to be addressed in a safe, open, transparent, respectful environment. And the second half of that is that the company then is obligated to take whatever action they need to take to solve those problems and challenges, but that those solutions are also communicated in a transparent, open, and respectful manner, so that people are encouraged to bring those fears and concerns to the surface. Otherwise, you're just going to have people that are disaffected, high level of attrition, high level of absenteeism, because people will feel like they haven't been heard, or they're not in a safe environment to uh, state their issues or challenges or concerns.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the idea of people latching on to a perception, if that transparency is there, and even that kind of matriculating amongst team members or amongst employees, I bet that that is something that can easily take place. So just curious as to what your perspective is on that and how that relates to confirmation bias.
Well, yeah. So confirmation bias is a really interesting topic too, because think about this. Even now, and even some of the people in the audience, maybe people that are going to be going back to the office with you, some still believe that this entire pandemic is a hoax. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. There's a lot of fear about the vaccines themselves and whether they're safe and whether it's too early to be giving vaccines, what the whole specter is of that. We've gotten to the point where there's not a lot of data-based truth being delivered to people so that they can make an informed decision. And so they're left to make decisions based on what's called confirmation bias. And what
Okay.
that is it's the tendency to search for or interpret information in a way that actually conforms to your closely held belief. So
Okay.
if I already believe that the pandemic is a hoax, then anything that comes into my view that confirms or conforms to that viewpoint that I have is truth. If it doesn't conform to the viewpoint I have, then it's false, or I'll push that back. And what ends up happening is, in a workplace, if you don't have some level of data coming in that, and I usually equate data with truth, because reporting out to employees is really important when it comes to workplace safety. If I'm not doing that, people will make up their own minds about what is safe and what is not. They'll make up their own minds about who is behaving appropriately and not. And I think that confirmation bias can actually spill over into some very negative things like violence and belligerent behavior. And we have to figure out ways within the facilities management reopening plan to mitigate those risks, as well as to enforce both compliance and enforcement of workplace behaviors. And a lot of that's going to be driven by people's confirmation bias.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. We've heard about confirmation bias from a broad standpoint, like how you just described. But when it comes to what that looks like in the workplace, it's going to be very interesting to see what that looks like internal to organizations. But to your point about data being a way to help really give people something tangible and truthful to really latch on to. I'd love for you to dig into that topic a bit more.
Well, sure. I spent a lot of time working with companies that are developing systems and technologies to help uh, uh, deliver data to their employees and actually mitigate some of those risks of confirmation bias. Some of them are entry point kiosks that will take temperature sensing and provide hand sanitizing and allow that as an access protocol to get into the building. And it's two-stage, so that if you do fail at the kiosk, you'll go talk to somebody. You might get your temperature read a second time before you're allowed into the building. All the data's cloud-based and aggregated immediately into the cloud. So if you fail at one kiosk, you can't just game the system and walk into another kiosk. It knows that you have failed that. There's also RFID technology and Bluetooth technology that can go into your badges that will beep when you're closer than 6 feet from somebody, so that people know how to safely social distance. And of course, you can actually track that data. So if somebody's behaving in a way that they're getting too close to others on a more frequent basis, then HR might get involved, or facilities and security might get involved and say, hey, you need to watch yourself because you're getting too close to people too often, and
Mhm.
that can create a safety issue within the company with respect to its new ways of working together.
Mhm.
That's one technology. Another technology is a company that's called 24A Life, which is actually based here in Minneapolis, or in Rochester, Minnesota, and has developed a workplace wellness app with the Mayo Clinic. Really cool app that helps you with managing your mental health, your stress, your anxiety, diet, exercise, social connectivity to your work group, so that even if you're working outside of the office, you can stay connected. And if you stay connected and you follow the recommendations in the app, you'll actually improve your overall well-being and mental health. So that's kind of a cool technology. There's also air monitoring systems. Some of these multi-tenant offices have they're not the demising walls don't go slab to slab, so you might actually in a multi-tenant building be breathing air from another suite in the office place that maybe they don't have the same sort of protocols that you do for safety, and it might actually put you and your employees at risk. So there's some air monitoring technology that's really neat. um, there's lots of really cool technologies, but all of those, the bottom line is that they deliver data, and then it's incumbent on the employer to provide that data to their employees to say, here is our air quality reading, here is the number of people who have failed entry point at the kiosk on a daily basis. You don't have to identify the people, but just the numbers, so people can see that the system is working and that people are being kept safe. When they
Mhm.
feel safe, they'll feel they'll be encouraged to continue to come into the office.
Yeah, man, you went down the list. Oh my goodness, Vic. And the amazing thing, which I'm not surprised, is we talked with smart buildings expert Anthony Very last time we met, and he was actually talking specifically around how retail is positioning differently and using different technologies to your point, keep people safe, but also collect data that can be shown to not only customers but employees. But to your point, that visibility of the data to the people in the space, and then also being able to to track the most important things. I think that's so poignant to what you're talking about, and it seems very consistent. So talk about what that does from uh a psychological safety perspective, and how that helps people, just that visibility of that data.
Yeah, so obviously data is truth. At least in my viewpoint, data means truth. So when you start to deliver data in a way that communicates a level of awareness to the fact that data is going to support well-being, and when you can provide data to the point where it actually encourages people to come back into the office. That's really important. Data can also help you in the same context with technology. It can help you make those financial and operational considerations that companies are going to have to make after they reopen too, which is what are they going to do with their portfolio? They may have an excess amount of space because some of their space will be converted to collaborative spaces. What are they going to do, and how are they going to sublease that space or dispose of that space? The data that talks about utilization and density and uh, the market driven information will all go into helping companies make financial and operational considerations. It'll also determine for the employer remote work strategies, who can work from home, which jobs are more flexible than others, which jobs need to be in the physical space in an office, which jobs can work from home, because
Yep.
that's different for every company as well. But all of this has to feed into the company's corporate culture. You can't force fit any of these technologies and the data that they provide and say, okay, based on the data alone, we're going to make these decisions. It has to be a combination of the data as well as how that merges with the company's corporate culture.
Yeah.
And some companies' cultures are, a little bit restrictive, so they're probably going to stay with more of the traditional, and some are very flexible, and they may actually get to the point where it can almost go from being a company that had a lot of office space to being a predominantly virtual organization.
And yeah, we've heard lots of, positions from whether it be Facebook, Twitter. I mean, lots of the bigs, right, that are going really hard one direction and then maybe backing off because they're seeing their company culture shift as a result. But still productivity is high. So yeah, it's really interesting kind of monitoring how people are making decisions based upon the data that they're monitoring for the organization.
Yeah, and if you go back to that Microsoft report, there are 7 trends that they called out in that report. One is that the flexible office, that's a given. That's here to stay. That's not going anywhere. But the leaders within corporate America are still out of touch. They still need to get to know what's been going on with their employees, and actually a higher level of empathy than they've currently been um, demonstrating that they have for what their employees have gone through. And we didn't talk as much about this, but people have had to disrupt their entire lives over the last year. So to sort of blanket that with one sort of platitude of a statement saying we understand it's been disruptive, it doesn't get to the actual matter. You have to get to each individual person's situation and be able to understand what they have gone through personally to be able to accommodate your collective employee base. But uh, the Microsoft theme was that leaders are out of touch, and this is a wake up call for them. Um, the other thing is that the workforce, even though we've been working remotely, we're exhausted. There is something called digital exhaustion that exists, and we need to figure out a way to accommodate that. It's not, there is such thing as Zoom fatigue. There is such thing as overextension because I don't have office hours anymore. I just work whenever I work, and sometimes I'm working all the time. So, and this goes back to human behavior. Sometimes people don't know how to shut it off. In some cultures, in some company cultures, if you don't answer your phone, you're in trouble, right?
Yep.
So, if you're at home, you may actually have a higher level of anxiety and fear because you're disconnected from your employer. And if your boss calls and you don't answer the phone, your immediate reaction is my boss thinks I'm out playing golf or goofing around, and my job is at risk unless I'm tied to my chair working every day or on Zoom calls or connected somehow. So that's creating a level of anxiety that didn't exist before.
Oh, man, I can only imagine. My aunt she's been in the pharmaceutical space and nursing space, and before the pandemic, she started working from home. They had a physical camera that set on top of her desk that had to just let them know basically that she was sitting at her desk while working from home. And I was flabbergasted at hearing that. And I was like, really? That's how detailed they're gonna get in like monitoring people? Do they even check those videos? How much data does that actually take up to keep those videos on file? How long do they keep the these are the things that was going through my head. But to your
Yeah,
point, there's a bit of I bet there is a bit of anxiety even without this camera, right? To what level of attachment do I have for lots of people, and it depends on company culture once
yeah.
again.
It does. It does. But there are some upsides to this too. I think that we now companies now realize that talent exists everywhere, and it's not necessarily a matter of place. So if you've got a phenomenal data scientist or engineer or technician or somebody you want to hire for your company, and they just happen to be sitting in St. Louis and you're a New Jersey based company, or they're happening to sit in Austin and you're a Seattle based company, you don't have to relocate them. You don't have to actually have them sit in your physical space. So now the level of talent can actually grow within a company, even though their workforce is more remote. So it could result in something that would be a huge benefit. The flip side of that is true too. Really good talent that is actually feeling overwhelmed or boxed in by their employer goes back to that 40% number that I gave you earlier that may end up leaving their company because of their feeling that they're um, not being given the right treatment by their employer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I did want to really quick note a comment we did get in the chat. David Gray says, "Great point.
David
We're
Gray.
right. We're missing this communication from executive leaders down to the employees. I hope to see more of that at the end of the year. I hope we see more of it before the end of the year, Dave." Uh, and I know Dave knows Vix, so it's good to
Yeah.
see you here on here.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave, and that's true. This is as I mentioned earlier, there's a wake up call to corporate leaders. There is a missing communication, and when I'm working with corporate clients and helping them develop a reopening plan, it's as simple as communicating the right tone. Not just saying here is our reopening plan, and then it reads very generically and very impersonally, but it contains statements like, "We understand the pandemic has been very difficult. We understand that it has disrupted your life. We understand that we as an employer have to change our expectations." Just those comments that show empathy and compassion for the employees will make a huge difference. But I can tell you, I've seen a lot of these reopening plans that are very technical. They all talk about physical safety, but they don't look at the employee's mental health. That needs to change. Executive leaders need to be able to communicate in terms where they feel and employees feel understood.
Absolutely.
Good
So,
comment, Dave.
yeah, thank you so much, David. Um, what I wanted to touch on, and actually, let's just go ahead and reset the conversation. For those of you who are just joining us, we are talking about the challenge of supporting your employees' mental health as you return to work, as people, as companies, employees, and executives alike are thinking about what this looks like. There is a true importance for us to think about how this affects psychological safety, what we can do about confirmation bias, through supplying data, allowing people to have truthful, factual information in order to help them make decisions about the future of organizations, and how we show up in a hybrid way, or offsite, or whatever you want to call it, remote, within the office. Have the data that's truly making sense for you to help make decisions for your organization. So with that, if you have any questions for Vic, who has been doing consultancy in this space, please pop them in the chat. We have a couple minutes left, and I have some questions for him left too. Vic, I wanted to ask you, with the changes that are being made now around the CDC guidelines for no longer wearing a mask outside or even wearing masks internal to spaces, how is this going to change how we collect data, how we can provide that comfort level for people as we think about um, what this return to office strategy might look like within
Yeah.
organizations.
Well, that decision by the CDC, um, I reacted to that personally. And the way I reacted to it was, well, that's great, but it doesn't allow me, unless I ask my employees to prove that they've been vaccinated, doesn't give me the confirmation that they've been vaccinated, that they might just be saying, I just rather not wear a mask anymore, so I'm not going to wear one. And in the workplace, there has to be some way of um, noting that you have been fully vaccinated. And in my personal life, I'm still going to wear a mask. I'm going in for my second shot next Friday. But I will still wear a mask even though I'm fully vaccinated. And again, that's because I'm protecting other people, but then I also don't know what other people have or have not done. If there's a way to validate that they have been vaccinated and you do that within a closed office environment and you do it as part of your policy,
Mhm.
okay. Not everybody's going to do that. Some people think that that's an infringement on personal liberties, and they may not want to disclose that, or they may falsify that information. So those are challenges, and it's going to skew the data if there's no way to confirm. Because remember, we went back to saying data is truth. But
Yep.
if I'm collecting data from somebody who I assume is vaccinated and there's no way to prove that, then I'm starting to bring in potentially bad data.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So that's an issue. But the priorities for every company in their reopening plan should be safety first and foremost, and that goes to this whole setting what the policy is going to be, wellness, hygiene, which is really more cleanliness, not personal hygiene, but cleanliness around spaces and surfaces, remote work strategies, and then those financial operational considerations that I talked about earlier. Because I think there is a pent up desire to be back in the office, but if it's not what you think it's going to be, and it's anticlimactic when you go back in, and you're given a choice of working from home, and you've been familiar with what homework is like for the last year, you may just say, yeah, I'll just stay home.
Yeah.
you know
People are certainly weighing those options, 100%. So thank you for your perspective on that change. And to your point, companies, it seems like companies will have to make those decisions around making decisions around what they will set as expectations, but in addition to that, make some requests for information in order for that data to be informative to the decisions that they're making for the organizations.
Yeah. What would be really interesting to see as a result of this pandemic? You know how there are surveys about great places to work? And a
Mhm.
lot of times, companies are ranked as a great place to work. It would be really neat to see healthiest places to work and have companies who have actually created an environment that is actually designed to improve your health at work and by work. So, in other words, if you work for this employer, your health will actually improve, which is a
Mm.
novel concept to think about. But it's something that I would be really interesting to see companies go out and compete for employees and recruit on the basis of, hey, come work for us, and you'll be a healthier individual.
That is a really cool idea, Vic. We I did want to acknowledge Henry's comment. Henry said, hopefully the pandemic has identified that those line managers who were ostensibly there to police by micromanaging employees, which is hugely detrimental to mental health, are now surplus to requirements. Henry, you're a riot. I appreciate you and your comments. Thank you for listening in. Hopefully I could catch you soon on Clubhouse. But
I
yes,
can give you a
yeah,
list.
I
I know.
know, right? Oh my goodness. Yes. So yeah, thanks for that comment, Henry. Um, Again, if anybody has questions specifically out there for Vic, I have one more left, but if you have any, please post them in the chat. And I wanted to kind of wrap this discussion up here, Vic, as obviously psychological safety is super, super important here. We're looking at what does that enforcement and compliance look like within organizations, but what do you think the trend is going to be long term, right? Like, what is your thought around those future trends?
Well, so I think, as I mentioned, there's a pent up desire to be back in the office, and companies are going to spend a lot of time devising these plans. I'm always willing to help review plans and make sure that they check all the boxes with respect to psychological safety, and really that they're thorough. There's a lot out there, but there's a lot of prescriptive offers out there from service providers and other consultants that say, hey, here's a plan, this will work, as opposed to let's build a plan that's aligned with your culture and aligned with your employees and really focused on what their needs are. So the more personal you can make the plan, the better. But I think overall, I still believe that the return will be anticlimactic unless companies get this wake up call, and like Henry said, the line managers that were micromanaging employees are become surplus. Companies are also going to have to be able to provide remote workers with a home office setup that is um, and make that an amenity or an incentive to recruiting new employees as well. Because people that are working from home, if they don't have an ergonomically correct chair, then they're going to have a workers' comp claim, and there's some liability and risk there for employers when it comes to remote workers. I think co-working spaces might be a good alternative for a lot of companies, because then you can reduce the commute, you can actually create a collaborative environment, and you don't have to go into the downtown office or drive 30 miles into work or whatever. But you're going to see a lot of sublease space. So all of those are kind of the big macro things that are going on, I think. But the immediate thing that companies can do for managing their employees' mental health and making return to work much more of a positive experience is, one, to communicate, have a plan, make sure that that plan is bottom up, so it has the voice of the employee built into it. Report out to your employees what's in the plan. Make it compassionate and empathetic to what their plight has been for the year. Make sure that there's constructive dialogue. In other words, a plan shouldn't be put in place and forgotten about. It should be a living document. And then I think enforcement and compliance are really important. Enforcement belongs with your facilities management and security apparatus within your company to make sure people are doing what they need to do within the physical space. If they don't, then it's a HR issue. Then it's more of a compliance issue or a disciplinarian issue. And as long as you can kind of create that, meeting of the minds within your organization as to who's responsible for what, I think you'll be successful. But I think companies really need to focus on mental health as part of their reopening plans. And too many of them, as of yet, the plans that I've seen, they're still missing the mark.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I really loved your comment about enforcement and really compliance, right? Those two things go back to the data point that you made earlier, right? If you have the ability to enforce and make sure that the organization is working within compliance with the plans that are being established early on, then what you will have is the ability to capture data around what is actually happening, and if there's anything falling out of that trend, right? Because if there's people falling out of that compliance, you can quickly bring that back into, you know, compliance, hopefully, right? And so again manage the situation, manage the data, and provide again that more certain, more comfortable, more psychologically safe environment that you want to supply. Also, the physically safe environment that you want to supply for your workforce.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. And I should mention also, I have a network that I run called Outsource USA, which is a bunch of independent companies. All of us that are part of OutsourceUSA.com are focused on the employee-centric workplace of the future. So they're all companies that are working on employee mental health, well-being, employee-centric design, everything related to making sure that the future, which is we all believe is going to be employee-centric, is one that's safe, productive, healthy, and ultimately the new way of working.
Yeah, love that so much, Vic. With that, I wanted to ask you, if people wanted to learn more about what you're up to, get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, obviously, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I post a lot of content on LinkedIn, so the best thing to do is get connected with me on LinkedIn. My website, www.virumconsulting.com, all one word. You can learn a lot about what I do and how I do it there. In fact, I've got a couple books that I've written you can download for free from my website, full of corporate real estate strategies and personal professional growth strategies. I'm on Twitter at Vic Bangia and at Virum Consulting, those two Twitter handles. You can contact me there. But yeah, or just in about an hour, go over to Dave Gray's Mosh Pit. I'll be over there. I spend a lot of time on things like this, Brittany, on webinars and other outlets to talk about the messages that I think are important to the industry. So I look forward to getting in contact with anybody who's got questions, and I'm always a resource. Regardless of if you hire me as a consultant or not, I'm always a resource to bounce ideas off of. So I'm always willing to help if anybody has any questions about challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Vic. Thank you, all of you who are in the audience and who have been listening in. I hope you got as much value out of this conversation as I have. Vic, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much again.
Well, Brittany, thank you. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. Thank you.